Okay, hello everyone. So we're waiting for our guest. He's joining us shortly. And thank you all for coming. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, this is very good. Thank you. I'm very happy to have you, Ms. President, Dr. Sana.
My pleasure, dear. I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Ghada, this is Rania. Ghada, can you put the camera a little bit lower? We can only see half your face.
Okay. So,
Yes,
thank you, Rania.
Yes, your beautiful face, mashallah. Now we can see it.
Okay, thank you so much, dear. Thank you. And we have Amr here. Thank you so much, Dr. Amr, for joining us. Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
I can hear you clearly, even without the headset. So thank you for coming today, and let me introduce you shortly. So just a minute. I'm juggling different things. Okay. So, okay. So here we go. So Dr. Amr Ali is a writer and a sociologist. He's the co-president of the Arab-German Young Academy of Sciences and Humanities in Berlin, the EGAIA. He's a visiting fellow at the Free University in Berlin right now. Dr. Amr Ali has received his PhD in sociology and political philosophy from the University of Sydney, and his work can be found at www.amrali.com. He writes Amr with an O at the end. Okay, so I hope this is accessible for everyone. Thank you so much for accepting the talk for today.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghada.
So your topic is, there's a PhD, then there's a PhD life.
Yeah,
You have prepared a beautiful 8 tips for people who are writing.
Yes. I hopefully it will be of some value to the PhD students or aspiring PhD students. And it's really a pleasure to be with you all today. And thank you, Dr. Ghada, for organizing this. And what I will do is, so I'll be using PowerPoint slides. And yes. 1 second. Okay, can you see the PowerPoint slides?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know why the video is turned off, but okay. Okay, so I want to begin by suggesting that someone once asked me many years, well, recently actually, it was a year ago, and they said, if you could go back in time, what would you do? And I said I would go back to my PhD and tell myself that it was never that complicated, that my thesis was deliberately complicated by me. And then I started to realize that I lived in a world where everyone who does a PhD seems to complain about their PhD because it's fashionable to complain about your PhD. And so the matter really got me thinking about how one engages with one of the most important chapters, no pun intended, of one's life. So I just want to... Okay, so the fact of the matter is that everyone, I should actually, before I start, I should say the whole PowerPoint slides is in memes. Now, the memes are not to scare you. It's actually, the whole point of these memes is to rebut these memes, to reject them, to show you why they're not, they're more, they might have some truth in it, but most of the time it's more done for entertainment. And this is what I see PhD students sharing, is these type of images. So I'm going to engage in these images to show you why they are not really, I won't say that they're not, that they cannot happen, but that they can be overcome. So the talk basically is a mix of personal and observations I've made over the years of other PhD students and how they engage with their PhD. And I'm taking a very informal and conversational approach. Okay, apparently I can also admit participants in this discussion. So some information for you might be, hello? Yeah. So some information might be new. It actually might be common sense to you, but I just want you to remember that the most important thing is that this is supposed to be a reminder that what you might have suspected or you might have forgotten, this is just to bring it back into the forefront of why, where, when, and how you do your PhD. So let us commence with the first part, just to let you know that instead of taking a chronological approach about doing a PhD, a cause and effect, let's look at the spaces of one's PhD life and how we can animate it, how we can improve it, rather than just going through like year by year. Let's look at the areas that are recurring all the time and how we can fix it or animate it or improve it or resuscitate it if need be. So first of all, it is something where I call not just the will, but the rage. The idea that you need to be uncomfortable with the status quo. There is a reason, if you're on the social sciences or the humanities or the arts, there is a reason why you do the thesis. Of course, I'm sure there might be an economic or social mobility aspect, but also that there's something in the world that makes you uncomfortable, and that is why you're doing a PhD. If everything was nice, if everything was perfect, if everything was okay, and you were content with the status quo, you would not be doing a PhD. The reason why you do a PhD is that there's something that unsettles your soul in the world, and you want to address it. And it brings me to my next point. Loving your thesis. It really makes the difference. Loving your thesis is the make or break. Now, I remember when I started my PhD, I remember meeting a PhD student who was in the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Sydney, and he was doing a very interesting thesis. It was on the politics of shark attacks, the shark attacks. And he said to me that people laughed at my topic when I introduced it, but I finished my topic before anyone else. And so, and the things he emphasized that you really have to love what you do. And Dr. Ghada has told me that in Egypt, it's not always your thesis that you choose. It's not always your topic. But I would also suggest that you try and find a way to make peace with your topic, even if it means you have to reinvent the motive of why you're doing the thesis. Because you can always find some angle of it where you can see it of benefit to you and to humanity. And on that same platform, you need to crystallize your worldview. If I was to ask you, what is your worldview? What is your philosophy in life? You should be able to give me the gist of it in a minute, because that really will reflect on your thesis. You've got to actually be philosophical about your relationship to your thesis. Now, it's not every day someone at a party will ask you, what's your worldview? I don't think that's going to really happen. But it helps to be aware of why you do what you do, and also connect what you do with a bigger picture of life. The other matter is that you've got to also be aware that not everyone can do a PhD. Sometimes it feels like everyone is doing a PhD because you're surrounded by PhD students, but it's actually a privilege to be in this position anywhere in the world to do a PhD, because 99% of humanity cannot do a PhD. And it's not for poverty reasons or class reasons, but it just could be that someone has health reasons or has to look after the family business, etc. Many people idealize the idea of doing a PhD, but they're not able to make that step because of countless obstacles. So if you can make it just to the level of being enrolled in a PhD, Alfa Mabruk, congratulations. This is really, really a mighty step in your life. The other aspect of it comes down to the writing. That is obviously what makes it possible, to write the PhD. And one way to look at it is that how many minutes can you put in a day? How many, can you put 20 minutes at the very least? Because you're going to have your up days and your low days. But but you've got to treat these days, the days that you choose to write your PhD, as something that's sacred, as a way to put input. And I just want to remind you that never think if you have a bad day where you don't write anything, that you haven't actually done something. Because often what's happening is that your ideas are accumulating at the back of your mind and it's building up, but you haven't actually crystallized it. And so sometimes when you think you haven't written, you have actually written it, but in your head, and it just pops up later when deadlines come or a moment of inspiration comes. So don't be harsh on yourself on this matter. The other approach to writing is to find a style of writing you love. Okay, is there a book, is there a novel out there that you love, that has had an impact on you, and that if you can negotiate it with your supervisor, you can incorporate this style of writing? So the content is important, but the style is important as well. Now, there are academic supervisors who are very, very rigid and they don't like colorful and flowery language. Okay, that's one matter. But do you have a supervisor where you can incorporate a style of writing that you're experimenting on? For example, I like the writings of Italo Calvino, the novella Invisible Cities. Sometimes I think about, could I incorporate that style of writing in my approach to my work? When I was doing my thesis, I fell in love with the writings of Hannah Arendt. Can I use this German philosopher as a way to incorporate that into my thesis writing? And yes, I did. I very much did. So the thing is, think of a book that you really love in terms of style and see if you can use the thesis as a project where you can improve your style of writing, not just the content, where you can introduce a new way of writing, at least new to you in life, that will give the thesis a breath of fresh air, that it makes the readers and examiners want to keep on reading this. Another 2 points that I'll raise, this writing topic is huge and I can't go into everything, but I will just get into the gist of it. And that is the title. Never underestimate the title of your work. The title sets the tone of the writing, not just the thesis title, but the chapter title. A good title can give you the motivation and the focus and the structure to be able to write in a certain way. And it's okay, you can change the title later on if the content moves in a different direction. That's okay, but always focus on the title, never underestimate it. Finally, on this point, the beginnings. Now, the introduction or the beginning of a chapter is really, really crucial, because a good introduction is really like 50% work already done of a chapter. If you really, really solidified it, it makes the conclusion easier to tie back to the introduction, but it also makes the body possible to flourish and to get a.
Amra, the screen has disappeared.
Okay, I'm back. Am I back again? Okay.
Yes, you're back. Hello.
Yeah, it must be the Alexandrian internet. So, okay.
Yeah.
So never underestimate the role of beginnings in your introduction and the beginning in your chapters. I can't stress this enough. There's just the way the idea, philosophically speaking, of beginnings is what makes things possible. We're talking from good morning in life, even sunrises, the birth of a baby. We always associate beautiful things with beginnings, with magical things. So always give emphasis to that. Never just rush through it. one second. And supervisor. Okay, now this can be a very tricky one, and it really depends on everyone's situation and their relationship to the supervisor. But you've got to know your supervisor. What type of supervisor are they? Because a supervisor could actually be like a marriage to you, especially if they're micromanaging things. So you've got to remember you're going to be with a supervisor for 4 years. Sometimes people change supervisors. Okay, that's fine. But do you have a good relationship with the supervisor? It's your right, and I think you should ask other students how was the supervision and if it worked for them. And a good supervisor, a secure supervisor with good self-esteem would be happy to recommend students that you can speak to. But it's really important to have a cordial relationship with the supervisor, and you're going to face a lot of challenges with a supervisor, even if they're kind and well-intentioned. And it could be not, the problem that they don't reply to emails for many months, for example. This is one of a common complaint. So you've got to make sure that this is straightened from the beginning with their supervision type approach. And depending on the university, what rights do you have if you're not satisfied with the supervisor? Are you able to change supervisors? Are you able to address matters? Does it even need an admin? Is your supervisor open enough for you to be able to communicate with them? So supervision is something that's crucial. It's more even important than the university that you're enrolled in. And it's something that needs to be worked on. But once you have a good supervisor, then everything starts to fall into place. Okay, now the idea of time, and it's really important, and I can't stress this enough, you've got to create a sacred time to write. When is the best time to write? Are you a morning person? Are you a night person? For some reason, I never meet afternoon persons. They're either morning or they're afternoon. I don't know why the screen is flickering.
Yes, it's the internet again.
It's actually better than the internet being cut off, so it's an improvement today. Maybe it's my hand gestures. I'm not sure what it is, but it's kind of scared of me. So the thing is that when do you write the best? And you've got to block these times out for writing. There's studies that have been done that show the most creative, inspiring time to write is after sunrise until noon. That is when your brain is on fire. And if you need to reply to emails or other routine things, leave that to the afternoon. But if you're a night person, you can just flip that around. The important thing is that you find the time where you write the best. Where is the best barakah in your time? This is crucial. And we've got to distinguish between discipline and motivation. People often say, I'm not motivated to write, but really that's not how it works. You've got to be disciplined to write. You've got to work on a regimen style of writing. If you write best from 7 a.m. till, I don't know, 11 a.m., then you've got to stick to those times, even if you're not motivated. You've got to do your best to give it its justice. Motivation depends on attitude and behavior and emotions. Discipline depends on habit and regular routine. So try and focus on the discipline. It's the way militaries think, it's the way religions think, it's the way, if you want results, you really need to focus on how you discipline your life in the context of the PhD. And the writing aspect in a disciplined format can yield more results than just simply saying if I'm motivated today or not. The other thing is about multitasking. Multitasking, believe it or not, is a new phenomenon. It's actually a very modern phenomenon. In the history of PhD writing and scholarly dissertations over the centuries, people just did one thing, and that's write their dissertation. But in the modern age, we have lots of multitasking, and this cannot be avoided. But hopefully it can be minimized, that you really dedicate one day to not one day in a week, of course, hopefully more than one day, but in that day you dedicate thesis writing, and other things like supermarket, grocery shopping, etc., can be done at a different time, hopefully maybe at night or maybe on a different day. But interruptions during your writing can really drain you of morale. So remember, writing requires momentum. When you start writing early in the day, it goes up and up and up and up, and then you're making progress. It's not like you can just open up and start writing and then you're making progress. It's not like that. It's a very gradual process till you get to the climax of what you're doing in your writing. It's not as simple as yeah, I'll do this today and I'll do this today and then I'll do my thesis. It's not as simple as that. You've got to give justice to your thesis. Okay, and so remember that life is very strange, but it's the way time works. Is that if I was to give my students an assignment and I tell them to hand it in 2 weeks' time, they will probably wait till the last day or two, and or maybe they just won't be able to do. Yeah, and so the fact of the matter is that when they have a day before, sometimes they can work miracles. I mean, we're all like this. It's not just the students. There's something about deadlines, which you should give yourself as well. If your supervisor is not giving it to you, try and create artificial deadlines. Sometimes I say, the deadline is the inspiration. And so if you can get yourself into a position where you can create more content out of limited time, that would be marvelous. And I can tell you from my experience with PhD students in Australia, I've come across single mothers who had part-time jobs, who finished their PhDs before full-time students on scholarships, and who had no other job. Why? Because these single mothers structured their time. It's really all about structuring. I can't emphasize that enough. With structure, that gives you freedom. Freedom to do other things, but also freedom to write brilliantly in your thesis. Also possible, another factor, and I'm guilty of this because I know I don't fulfill this, is to deactivate social media and hide your phone. The fact of the matter is that it is really one of the biggest distractions that happens, and phones can really mess up your mind and your thinking compass when they're used often. Having said that, social media has benefited me a lot from the journal articles that are published or the recommendations, content. It's another world, and it has its positives. But if you have to, for example, post something, and especially if it's going to grab your attention, then I would suggest use the social media on the weekends, because you're going to be that person maybe that has to check if you got comments or likes. So try to give social media a specific time of the day or time of the week, and give more justice to your thesis during the weekdays. Space is really important where you work. Now, for me, I write for some reason more in a cafe than I do in a library or an office. You've got to know where your space is. Where in Cairo do you find yourself doing better? Is it at the library? Is it in Rico Cafe Maadi? I just had to say that because I miss that cafe. Is it in Costa? Is it in Vino's? Is it in the home? Can the home be conducive? And I find that if you do the same space every day, it becomes difficult to write as good as I did the day before. Cafes for me can be a bit costly. I think after a while, if you keep going to cafes, but they have done studies on this, and they found that cafes do do enable a colorful creativity to come out of your mind because of the space, the ambience, and it depends on the cafe. It's not like you can just go to an ahwa and do your thesis there. It might not be as effective. But you know your cafe spaces and where you might be able to do well. And so it's something that really you've got to think about. Can you do it with a friend who's doing a thesis? It actually helps a lot. It gives you a motivation to do well together. And what I do is that we turn off our phones, like completely power off for 3 hours. We don't talk, besides the greeting and all that, etc. And we try and write as much as we can. So the environment the environment does matter. And also, I put there the chair you sit on matters. If you have a chair that's causing you back pain or other problems, I would say it's really worth investing in a chair. Of all the things you can invest in a home, especially in the pandemic age, the chair really matters. It's different, and of course, get up every 20, 30 minutes to exercise or to stretch. Don't sit 1 hour straight in a chair. It's really important you do these mobility, these movements. And if you're a coffee person like me, a good coffee also makes a huge difference. Tools, and we get onto the subject. Tools matter, technology matters. People say, no, you can do, I can do it any way I want, sure, but it might take you longer. One of my biggest regrets during my thesis is that I waited very late to use citation software, which for me, it was EndNote. And if I had learned to do EndNote from the beginning, I might have saved 3 or 4 months of work rather than manually putting things in before, etc. It was a big mess. But these are investments that you do, and I promise you, you save so much time later on. So citation software, there's EndNote, there's Zotero. Maybe your university has a license or they have a preference. Try and find out which one it is. See which one you're comfortable with or matches the style of writing. But I don't know much about Zotero or the others. I've only used EndNote and I do like it. Organizational software, Microsoft OneNote is free. I highly recommend it. It really has allowed me to mind map all my thoughts, not just my PhD, but other research and life matters. So just go on YouTube and see a tutorial. You will love it. And if it's not OneNote, there's other software out there. But Microsoft OneNote is really one of my favorites. The other is qualitative, quantitative analysis software like Envivo, MaxQDA, Atlas. There's so many out there. You might not even be necessary to use them, but just check if the amount of data that you have requires to have or to use this type of software, or if your university has a license to it, or if you can't, can you get it from somewhere else? So I would never downplay the use of technology in this. On matters of health, I've got to emphasize this, that the PhD is one crucial aspect of your life. It is not your life. Maybe it's common sense, but we forget this and we start talking about our PhD, stressing about it. It becomes the subject of everything, but it doesn't help when everyone else is asking you, how's your PhD? Is there a PhD? You know, it's a very repetitive thing, and it's a big deal. Let's face it. You chose to do a big deal in your life, and you're going to have to engage with that. But I need to emphasize that the social life is key. You've got to integrate that into your life. The PhD is not everything. As beautiful as a PhD is, it will never be on the level of your family, your loved ones, your health. The PhD is just one chapter that you've embarked upon, and inshallah, it has a conclusion. It has an ending. It has a graduation. Okay, you don't do it forever. Don't treat it like you do it forever. It feels like you're doing it forever, but it does have an ending. And so it's important to address mental health as well. I know in Egypt, it used to be a stigma many years ago, but it's good that, you know, there's been less of a stigma now to talk about going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. A long time ago, this was unheard of, but there has been improvements and acceptance in this area. All right, so it's not it's not a shame, and it's okay to look into this matter of how it can be addressed, because above all, your health is key, more important than anything, more important than the PhD. And I'll get to this point now, the public persona. By the way, with this meme, I don't care if you don't call me a doctor. I'm not worried about the title doctor, but you know, as we know, some people are very concerned about being addressed as this title. But I've written an article about this, how this has become a problem as a syndrome, where people get upset if you don't call them doctor. Anyway, the question here is, what do you want to do outside your PhD life? Do you want to be of value to the public? Do you want to write a blog like on WordPress, or write opinion pieces, or offering lectures and workshops in your field? These are very critical matters that can rejuvenate the value you feel in life, in the world. I will actually tell you this. Once a United Nations official said to me, he said to me that my blog has done more for me than my 2 masters and PhD combined. And that kind of made me sad, but I do understand what he meant, that when people look for you, they don't look for your degrees. That's not possible. They will Google you, and the first thing that will show up is most likely your blog or your article that you've written, or a LinkedIn profile. But you know, the degrees tend to, for some reason, take secondary place. So you need to think about how can you tie what you do with the public. Don't ever feel that what you're doing has been written. Everyone is unique in their perspectives, in how they engage the world. There are no 2 people on this planet that will be the same. So how can you share your unique perspective and experience in this world, and through which medium? Because everyone has a burning desire to say something. They want to, and of course, not say anything, but say something worthwhile. And the question is, how do you refine that and hone that to offer your perspective to the world? So in conclusion, we've got to animate the critical spaces in your doctoral life, whether it's the will, the writing, the supervisor, relationship, the time you engage with, the space that you're in, the tools that you use, the health, and all types of health, not just mental health, but physical health, as well as the public persona, and then how do you want to engage with the public. So remember, the PhD journey is really multifaceted, and it can be enjoyed as well. And as I say here, it's okay to do other things. It's really okay. It's not normal to just do your PhD. You can have a creative pursuit, a hobby, a sport, whatever it is, but you need to understand and not to fall into this trap that everything just becomes your PhD. You can do other things in life that support your PhD, that will give you the health and the perspective, and the breathing air to be able to do better in your PhD. And also understand the implications of doing a PhD in a pandemic. You are living in a very abnormal time. This is a very weird time to be living in, and it's an achievement to do your PhD under a pandemic. I take my hat off to you that you're doing something that I didn't have to worry about. So just keeping safe and healthy and keeping your family safe and healthy is a big task on its own. And so by doing a PhD, just remember, you're not living in a very normal common era. It's coming with a different set of challenges. And so I do ask you to be kind to yourself in this. And the enjoyment of the PhD journey means structuring your writing, being aware of your worldview and your limits. And I'll re-emphasize the point again, be kind to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amr. You're not just a PhD scholar, you're actually an authority on writing, and it's one of the most delightful and interesting pieces I've ever read on Alexandria, of course. Thank you for your presentation. It's really nice, and you talked about the things that it's like the elephant in the room. We always know about it, but we don't sit down and talk about it. Like
Mm.
mental health, like how to promote our own work later after we've done with our PhD. It's like building the public persona or popularizing the topics that we're doing in our academic circles back to the popular sites. And of course, structuring your day. All these ideas about guilt and multitasking or prioritizing our writing. So it was beautiful that you would tap upon all these concerns. So here I'm opening the floor, and Dr. Amr is like inviting everyone to engage in Arabic and in English if you'd like to have questions for him to answer. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
I can ask or just, comment.
Yes,
okay.
please, Dr. Sana, of course.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amr, for this beautiful presentation. It was really inspiring, and I'm waiting for the recording. If you don't mind to send it, to share it with my son, whom I want very much to do a PhD. However, this generation, they are wondering, what is the use of doing a PhD other than the passion, other than liking the topic, other than maybe enjoying the process? But they feel that the job market does not really need a PhD except if he's going to go into academia. Do you think this is a correct assumption?
Actually, people, okay, thank you, Dr. Sana. It's a very important question, and it's a question that many do think about, given the perception that there's an oversupply of PhD students in the world.
Mm.
But there are many people who don't go into academia. They go into the United Nations or journalism or NGOs, civil society, cultural organizations, even business. It's not unusual to hear that happening. I think many would like to go into teaching, but often there can be a limit to that. And so the way I look at it is that when I started my PhD, I knew I was going to face many obstacles, and I still do. It's not like it's a very easy road, but I also had to see that we are fortunate to be in the space because the PhD and academia is the last bastion of idealism in the world. We have lost the ability to think creatively in most organizations and most institutions in the world. And when you go to a bureaucracy or if you go to a bank, there's a certain type of thinking, of engagement that we're familiar with. The academic field opens that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you get a PhD and you try to look for a job and then that's the end of the world has come to an end, and because you can't find something. You can always do something else and do that on the side. Ideally, I wish the new liberal academy would restructure itself globally to enable more PhD students.